The collective council chamber had been repaired quickly, though scorch marks still marked the walls where Ravager weapons had breached. Every species of the collective was represented, but this time the humans weren't standing as supplicants. They stood as equals. Velthar opened the session. His light was different now, more subdued, less arrogant. The Galactic Collective was founded on principles of peace and enlightenment. For 10,000 years we believed violence was a disease to be cured. The Ravager attack has forced us to reconsider. A Kalari elder named Dai Jung spoke next. We owe humanity a debt we can never repay. They saved us when our own defenses failed. But we must address the difficult question, are they still too dangerous to join us? Murmurs spread through the chamber. Taman felt Bitna tense beside him, but he placed a calming hand on her arm. Thess rose to speak. The crystal being's colors shifted to respectful blue. I have worked closely with the humans during their stay. I befriended them, and I watched them fight to protect us. Yes, they are capable of great violence, but they choose when to use it. That is the crucial difference we failed to understand. Another delegate from a species called the Varani stood, but they brought nuclear weapons to a diplomatic meeting. They've been lying to us from the start. Admiral Su Jin, who'd been given permission to attend, spoke for the first time. We brought weapons because we didn't trust you. Your invitation sounded too good to be true, and our intel suggested you were evaluating us for quarantine, not membership. Were we wrong? Silence. The collective delegates couldn't deny it. We've been watching humanity for decades, a young Quilari named Bora said. We saw your wars, your weapons, your aggression, but we never asked why you fought. We just assumed you enjoyed violence. We don't, Hana said quietly. Every human who fired a weapon yesterday is dealing with what they had to do. We'll be processing this for years, but we did it because the alternative was watching innocent people die. Velthar moved to the center of the chamber. I have been thinking about something Captain Taman said. He told me that humanity remembers violence so they don't repeat it. We, the collective, forgot violence because we never needed it. We became soft, complacent. We judged humanity for retaining what we had the privilege of forgetting. Are you saying we should militarize? Asked an elder delegate, horrified. No, I'm saying we should recognize that peace has many forms. We achieved peace through evolution in a safe environment. Humanity achieved peace through choice despite existing in a dangerous one. Both are valid. Perhaps humanity's way is even more meaningful, because they could choose violence but usually don't. Tae-min stepped forward. The collective wanted angels, beings incapable of harm. But I'll tell you what the galaxy needs. It needs guardians. It needs people who remember how to fight but choose peace whenever possible. We're not angels. We're humans. We're flawed, aggressive, and sometimes brutal. But we're also loyal, determined, and when we commit to protecting something, we don't give up. You wanted to quarantine us, Bitna added. Lock us away because you feared what we might become. But monsters can't protect you from cages. You need us out here standing between civilization and chaos. Ambassador Jae-ho, who'd been silent until now, spoke. The question isn't whether humanity is dangerous, we are. The question is whether you can trust us to use that danger responsibly, to be your shield instead of your threat. The council debated for hours. Some species still feared humanity. Others, like Thess and the Quilari, argued passionately for acceptance. The older, more conservative members wanted restrictions. The younger ones, who'd seen humans bleed to protect them, wanted full membership. Finally, Velthar called for silence. We must vote. But first I want to share what I learned yesterday. When the Ravagers were boarding the station, a group of humans formed a defensive line in front of a Lumine nursery. 3 humans died protecting children that weren't even their species. That is not the action of monsters. That is the action of guardians. The vote took place. It wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity would join the collective, but not on the original terms. Admiral Su Jin presented Earth's conditions. We won't disarm. We won't submit to cultural modification. We won't be treated as children who need guidance. We'll join as equals or not at all. What do you want in return? Asked Dae-jung. Technology sharing, scientific cooperation, trade agreements, and the dissolution of the quarantine protocols for the 3 species you've imprisoned for centuries. That caused an uproar. Several delegates objected, but Thess silenced them. The humans are right. We caged those species out of fear. We kept them imprisoned for generations. If we truly believe in enlightenment, we must free them and offer them the same choice we're giving humanity. After more debate, the terms were agreed upon. The Terran Accord was drafted. Humanity would join the collective as full members with no restrictions. In exchange, Earth would provide military protection and training. The collective would share their technology. Together, they would work as partners. The 3 quarantined species would be contacted, their restrictions lifted, and offered true membership. It would take time to rebuild trust, but it was a start. Taemin was offered a position as the first human admiral in the newly formed collective. Defense Force. It was a position created specifically to integrate human military doctrine with collective technology. I don't want to militarize you, he told the council. I want to teach you how to protect yourselves without losing your peaceful nature. How to be strong without being aggressive. Hana stayed as cultural liaison, working to bridge the gap between human pragmatism and collective idealism. She organized exchange programs where collective species learned from humans and vice versa. Ambassador J-Ho resigned. He'd been proven wrong about everything and couldn't reconcile his beliefs with reality. He returned to Earth a broken man, his faith in pure diplomacy shattered. Bitna took over security training for the entire collective. Her first students were terrified of her, but they learned. She taught them that violence wasn't evil, it was a tool. And like any tool, it could be used for good or evil depending on the wielder's intent. Kyungsoo and Mirai led the effort to rehabilitate the quarantined worlds. It was difficult work. Those species had been caged for so long that they didn't trust anyone. But slowly, gradually, bridges were built. 6 months later, the Ravagers returned. They brought a full invasion fleet, expecting easy prey. They'd analyzed the previous battle and adapted their tactics. What they found instead was a collective defense fleet commanded by humans and crewed by mixed species teams. The Quilari operated sensors with precision humans couldn't match. The Lumini managed energy systems with perfect efficiency. The Varani coordinated communications across vast distances, and humans taught them all how to fight. The battle was brutal, but brief. The Ravagers hadn't expected coordinated resistance. They hadn't expected the peaceful collective species to meet them with railguns and missiles. They retreated after losing half their fleet. On Earth, people watched the news with complex emotions. Humanity had become the galaxy's military, the warriors standing between civilization and chaos. It wasn't what they'd hoped for when they first received the collective's invitation, but it was what the galaxy needed. In his office aboard the newly commissioned CDF headquarters, Taemin reviewed casualty reports. 17 dead in the latest battle, mostly human but some Quilari and Varani too. Each death hurt. Velthar visited him that evening. The Lumini leader had become something like a friend over the months. Do you regret teaching us violence? Velthar asked. I taught you defense. There's a difference. Is there? We now have weapons. We now have soldiers. We've become more like you. Taemin shook his head. No, you've become more complete. You always had the capacity for violence, every sentient species does. You just forgot you had it. We reminded you, and more importantly, we taught you to control it. I still fear what your species might become, Velthar admitted. You're so good at warfare. What if you decide to conquer instead of protect? Then you stop us, Taemin said simply. That's what allies do. We keep each other honest. You remind us not to lose our humanity. We remind you not to lose your strength. Velthar glowed softly. The council asked me to deliver a message. They want to thank humanity formally. You didn't have to save us. You could have left us to our fate. No, we couldn't. That's not who we are. Even after we planned to quarantine you, to imprison your species, you were afraid. Fear makes people do stupid things. We've done plenty of stupid things out of fear. At least you recognized your mistake. A collective child approached Taemin in the recreation area a few weeks later. The small Quilari, a young one named Sang-woo, looked up at him with curious, glowing facets. Are you a monster? The child asked innocently. Taemin knelt down to the child's level. Sometimes, when I need to be, to protect people like you. My parent says humans are scary but good. Your parent is very wise. Will you teach me to be scary too? Taemin smiled. When you're older, if you want to learn, I'll teach you. But remember, being able to hurt others doesn't make you bad. It's what you do with that ability that matters. The child thought about this, then nodded. I want to protect people too, like you did. The first human warship to decloak was the Retribution. She was ugly compared to the elegant collective vessels. all angles and armor plating built for function rather than beauty. Behind her came two more destroyers, the Vengeance and the Dauntless. They were smaller than the Collective's Keeper drones, older than the alien technology, and absolutely deadly. Admiral Sujin's voice came through on the emergency channel. "Captain Taemin, this is Sujin. We've been shadowing your diplomatic mission since day one. Command didn't trust the Collective's intentions. Looks like that paranoia paid off. What's your situation? Under heavy attack by hostiles called Ravagers. Station shields failing. Collective defenses are inadequate. We need immediate combat support." There was a pause. When Sujin spoke again, her voice had changed. It was the voice of someone who'd spent 40 years in the military. Someone who'd commanded fleets through the Unification Wars. "Understood. All ships weapons free. Let's show these things why you don't mess with humanity." The Collective observers watched in horror and fascination as the human ships entered battle. There was no hesitation, no warning shots, no attempts at communication. The Retribution simply identified the nearest Ravager vessel and fired. The difference was immediate. Human weapons weren't as powerful as Collective technology, but they were efficient. Railguns fired solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. Missile pods launched swarms of guided warheads. Point defense systems created walls of bullets that shredded incoming fire. And the tactics, the Collective Keepers had fought defensively, trying to protect the station while following rules about proportional force and minimizing enemy casualties. The human ships fought like wolves. They coordinated, flanked, concentrated fire on single targets until they were destroyed, then moved to the next. Within minutes, a dozen Ravager ships were debris. "This is barbaric," Velthar whispered. "Such efficient killing." "It's called war," Bitna replied. "We're very good at it." Kyung-Soo had successfully reprogrammed the remaining Keeper drones. They moved differently now, aggressive and lethal. Combined with the human ships, they began pushing the Ravagers back. But the enemy adapted. More ships emerged from jump points. They changed tactics, targeting the human vessels specifically, recognizing them as the greater threat. Multiple contacts jumping in, Taemin reported, watching the tactical display. "They're surrounding us." "Let them," Sujin replied. "All ships execute pattern Omega. Captain Taemin, I need you to drop the station's shields for exactly 3 seconds when I give the signal. That will expose us to enemy fire. Trust me." Taemin did trust her. Sujin had been a legend during the wars, known for impossible victories. "Ready on your mark." The human ships suddenly stopped firing and began retreating as if overwhelmed. The Ravagers pursued eagerly, closing in for the kill. They concentrated their forces surrounding the human vessels. "Now," Sujin shouted. Taemin dropped the shields. For 3 seconds, Unity Station was completely vulnerable. In those 3 seconds, the Retribution launched something new. Nuclear missiles. The Collective species gasped. Thess's crystalline body flashed white with shock. Felthar's light blazed with horror. Humanity had brought nuclear weapons to a peaceful diplomatic meeting. The missiles weren't aimed at the station. They flew past it and detonated in the center of the Ravager formation. The explosions were precise, carefully calculated to maximize damage to enemy ships while keeping the radiation away from the station. Dozens of Ravager vessels simply ceased to exist. The survivors were scattered, disorganized. The human ships surged forward and tore through them with ruthless efficiency. Inside the station, Bitna's security teams were fighting their own battle. Ravager boarding pods had breached the hull in 3 locations. The creatures that emerged were nightmares. Chitinous armor, multiple limbs, and an absolute lack of fear or mercy. The Collective civilians fled. They'd never seen violence up close. The humans didn't flee. They formed defensive lines and opened fire. Hana found herself holding a rifle for the first time since her military service ended. She'd become a scientist because she believed in peace. But watching the Ravagers tear through helpless civilians made her remember why she'd learned to fight in the first place. "Fire in controlled bursts," Bitna commanded over the comm. "Aim for the joints in their armor. Don't waste ammunition." The Ravagers were tough, but they weren't invincible. Sustained fire brought them down. The humans held their positions, protecting the Collective civilians behind them. When the aliens saw humans standing between them and the monsters, something shifted. Kyung-Soo was everywhere, racing through corridors with repair teams, keeping critical systems online. He found Mireille helping wounded Quilari, her hands covered in strange-colored blood that passed for the alien's life fluid. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she replied honestly. "But we're alive because of you. Because humans know how to fight." In space, the battle raged for 6 hours. The Ravagers kept coming, but the human ships and reprogrammed keepers held the line. Admiral Sujin commanded the fleet with cold precision, always 2 steps ahead of the enemy. Taemin watched from the station's bridge, coordinating between the space battle and the internal defense. He saw his people fighting and dying, saw collective species learning what war actually meant, saw the cost of violence even when violence was necessary. Ambassador J-Ho stood beside him, holding a rifle he'd never expected to use. The diplomat's face was pale but determined. "I thought we'd evolved beyond this." "We have," Taemin replied. "We don't fight because we want to. We fight because sometimes it's necessary." The collective forgot that lesson. The turning point came when Sujin identified the Ravager command ship. It was larger than the others, coordinating the attack. She committed all 3 human warships to destroying it, a risky move that left the station exposed. "Concentrate all fire on that ship," she ordered. "Don't stop shooting until it's dead." The human vessels poured everything they had into the Ravager flagship. Railguns, missiles, point defense lasers, everything. The enemy ship's shields held, then flickered, then failed. The hull began breaking apart. The Ravagers realized they were losing. Their coordination faltered. The remaining ships began retreating toward jump points. "Should we pursue?" asked the captain of the Vengeance. "Negative," Sujin replied. "Let them go. They'll spread the word. Humans fight back." As the last Ravager ship disappeared into jump space, a strange silence fell over Unity Station. The alarm stopped. The weapons fell quiet, and the collective species stared at the humans with new eyes. The cost had been high. 147 human casualties, thousands of collective deaths, mostly from the initial attack before humans engaged. Entire sections of the station were destroyed. The dead were counted, the wounded treated. Velthar found Taemin in the medical bay helping evacuate wounded Kilari. The Lumini leader's light was dim, subdued. "You saved us," Velthar said quietly. "We saved each other," Taemin replied. "Your technology kept the shields up long enough for us to arrive. Your keepers, once properly programmed, were incredibly effective. But it was your violence that won, your willingness to kill without hesitation." Taemin stopped working and looked directly at the alien. "We didn't kill without hesitation. Every death weighs on us. Every weapon fired is a choice we make. But we make that choice when necessary, because we remember what happens when no one is willing to fight." "I was wrong about your species," Velthar admitted. "We all were. We thought violence was a disease you hadn't cured. We didn't understand it was a tool you'd learned to control." "We're not perfect," Taemin said. "We make mistakes. We struggle with our aggressive instincts. But we've learned something important. Peace isn't the absence of strength. It's the choice not to use strength except when necessary." Velthar glowed a little brighter. "The council is convening tomorrow. We must discuss humanity's place in the collective." "I know what you were planning," Taemin said. "The quarantine. Kyungsoo found the protocols. Yes, we were going to imprison your species, keep you isolated until you evolved into something we found acceptable." Velthar's shame was visible in his dimming light. "We were going to do to you what we did to 3 other species. Keep them caged for centuries because we were afraid of what they might become. And now I understand that we were the ones who needed to evolve. We became arrogant in our safety. We forgot that peace is a privilege, not a given, and we nearly paid for that arrogance with extinction." As Taemin returned to his quarters that night, exhausted and covered in blood that wasn't his, he thought about what Ambassador J-Ho had said. Had humanity really evolved beyond violence? No, they'd evolved beyond uncontrolled violence. They'd learned when to fight and when to hold back. They'd become monsters by choice, not by nature. And sometimes the galaxy needed monsters. The alarms were deafening. Taemin ran to the nearest observation deck and saw them on the view screen. Dozens of dark ships emerging from jump points, their hulls covered in what looked like organic armor. They moved with purpose, spreading out in an attack formation that any human military officer would recognize instantly. "What are those?" Hana asked, arriving beside him. "Trouble," Taemin replied. Velthar's voice came over the station-wide communication system, but the usual calm was gone. He sounded confused, almost panicked. Unknown vessels, this is Unity Station of the Galactic Collective. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response was immediate. The lead ship fired. A beam of energy struck the station's outer shields, causing them to flicker. "They're attacking us," someone gasped. It was Thess, the Kilari who had been kind to the humans. The crystalline being's colors were flashing rapidly, a sign of distress. "Why are they attacking us? We've done nothing to them." Taman was already assessing the situation with a soldier's eye. "How long until your defensive systems respond?" "Defensive systems?" They seemed confused. "We have the Keepers. They will activate and eliminate the threat." On the view screen, Taman watched as large drone ships began launching from hidden bays around the station. The Keepers were impressive, each one the size of a small cruiser. They positioned themselves between the station and the attacking ships, then broadcast what sounded like warnings. The unknown ships ignored them and fired again. This time, dozens of energy beams struck the station simultaneously. Shields held, but barely. The Keepers finally returned fire. Their weapons were powerful, but Taman noticed something wrong immediately. They moved slowly, positioning themselves carefully, firing only when they had clear shots. They were following rules of engagement designed for law enforcement, not warfare. "They're not fighting," Bitna said, appearing at Taman's side. "They're trying to arrest them." She was right. The Keepers were attempting to disable the attacking ships, not destroy them. They targeted engines and weapon systems with precision. It might have worked against an opponent that cared about being captured. These attackers didn't care. They rammed through the Keeper formations, taking damage but continuing forward. For every attacking ship destroyed, 2 more emerged from jump points. "What are they?" Kyung-soo asked, staring at the view screen. "I accessed the Collective's threat database," Mireille said, her voice shaking. "They're called Ravagers, a hive-minded species that's been expanding through this sector for decades. They consume everything: organic matter, technology, raw materials, entire worlds. Why didn't the Collective warn us about them?" Hana demanded. "Because they're not supposed to be here," Thess said quietly. This sector was safe. The Ravagers were contained in the outer regions. Something has changed. On the view screen, 2 Keeper drones were destroyed by concentrated fire. Taman watched the station's shields drop to 60%. The Collective had never faced a real attack before, and it showed. Their defenses were designed by people who'd forgotten what war looked like. "We need to evacuate," Jeho said, his diplomatic calm finally breaking. "Get everyone back to the Horizon's Promise and run." "There are thousands of civilians on this station," Taman said. "We can't just leave them. We're 37 humans and a small diplomatic ship." "What can we do?" Bitna pulled out a small device from her pocket. It looked like a simple communication unit, but Taman recognized it immediately. An emergency beacon, military grade. If she activated it, every human ship within range would know they were in trouble. "Don't," Jeho said quickly. "If we call for military help, we confirm everything the Collective fears about us. We'll never be trusted." "If we don't call for help, we'll all die," Bitna shot back. "Trust doesn't matter to corpses." Taman grabbed the beacon. "Not yet. Let's see if the Collective can handle this." They couldn't. Over the next hour, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The Keepers destroyed dozens of Ravager ships, but hundreds more kept coming. The station's shields dropped to 40%, then 20%. Sections of the outer hull were breached. Alien civilians who'd never known violence fled through corridors, not knowing where to hide. The Collective Council gathered in an emergency session. Taman and his team were summoned. When they arrived, they found chaos. The various species were talking over each other, some suggesting surrender, others proposing evacuation. Velthar still tried to maintain order, but even his light seemed dimmer. "We will not abandon our principles. Violence is not the answer. We must find a peaceful solution." "They're not interested in peace," Taman said. "They're interested in consuming the station and everyone on it. Then we will evacuate. The Collective will relocate to another system. You don't have time. Those ships will destroy you before you can organize an evacuation." Velthar turned his glowing form toward Taman. For a moment, pride warred with desperation on the alien's face. Then quietly he said, "What would you do, human?" Taman looked at the tactical display. He saw the attack patterns, the weak points in the Ravager formations, the opportunities that any trained officer would spot instantly. He also saw the Keepers, powerful but hobbled by programming that didn't understand real warfare. "I would fight," Taman said simply, "not by your rules, not with restraint or mercy. I would fight to win. That is exactly what we feared from your species, Velthar said. That violent instinct. And now you need it, Bitna said coldly. Funny how that works. The station shook from another impact. Shields were at 10%. In the corridors outside, Taman could hear screaming. Help us, Thess said suddenly. The Quilari's colors had stabilized into a deep blue that Taman had learned meant determination. Please, I know we judged you harshly. I know we were preparing to quarantine your species. But we were wrong. We've been safe for so long that we forgot the galaxy isn't always safe. Help us. Velthar said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Taemin looked at his team. Hana nodded slowly. Kyungsu's fingers were already moving on his datapad, preparing. Even Jaeho, despite his fear of confirming the collective's worst beliefs about humanity, gave a reluctant nod. Bitna, Taemin said quietly. She activated the beacon. The signal went out, encrypted, powerful. Any human military vessel within 10 light years would receive it. The message was simple: under attack. Need immediate assistance. Taemin turned to Kyungsu. Can you access the Keeper control systems? Already in, the engineer replied. Their security is good, but it's designed to stop hackers, not military infiltration. Give me 10 minutes and I can reprogram their combat algorithms. Do it. Bitna, get our crew armed and ready. I know we brought weapons despite the collective's rules. Bitna smiled grimly. Enough for everyone. Even Ambassador Jaeho, though I don't think he knows how to use a rifle. I was in the service, Jaeho said stiffly. 20 years ago, but I remember. Taemin addressed Velthar directly. I need full access to the station's systems. Weapons, shields, communications, everything. And I need you to tell your people to follow human commands without question. Can you do that? The Lumini leader's light pulsed slowly. He was watching everything he believed in crumble around him. His peaceful society, his enlightened principles, his moral superiority. All of it meant nothing against an enemy that didn't care about civilization. I authorize it, Velthar said finally. Save us, Captain Taemin. Save us with your violence. Taemin accessed the station's tactical network. Information flooded his vision. Ship positions, weapon status, shield integrity, damage reports. It was bad. The Ravagers had them surrounded and were preparing for a final assault. But Taemin had fought in bad situations before. Humanity had been fighting in bad situations for thousands of years. It was practically their specialty. Kyungsu status, uploading new combat protocols to the Keepers now. They're not going to like it. I'm basically teaching them to kill efficiently instead of arrest carefully. Good. Bitna, position our people at key defensive points. If the Ravagers breach the hull, I want them met with bullets. On it. Taemin opened a channel to the Horizon's promise. This is Captain Taemin to all crew. Battle stations. Prepare for combat operations. The bridge crew responded immediately. They were diplomats and scientists officially, but every human on that ship had military training. Earth hadn't sent unarmed innocents into space. They'd sent survivors. On the view screen, Taemin watched the Ravagers mass for their final attack. There were hundreds of them now. The station's shields were failing. The Keepers were reduced to a dozen functional units. Then on the edge of the sensor range, 3 new contacts appeared. Human signatures. The emergency response fleet had arrived, and they hadn't come to talk. The first test took place in a large simulation chamber. Taemin and his team sat at a curved table while holographic images surrounded them. The scenario was simple. 2 colonies needed the same rare resource, and there wasn't enough for both. Violence seemed like the obvious solution. Begin, said Velthar from his observation platform above them. Hana immediately started talking about resource sharing and compromise. Kyungsu suggested technological solutions to reduce consumption. Jaeho proposed a council to oversee fair distribution. Within an hour, they had a peaceful solution that satisfied both colonies. The simulation ended. Taemin expected approval. Instead, Velthar seemed disappointed. You resolved the conflict efficiently, the Lumini said slowly. But your solution showed military thinking. Resource rationing, strategic positioning, fallback plans. You approached peace like a battlefield campaign. Is that wrong? Taemin asked. We solved it without violence. You solved it while thinking about violence, Velthar replied. That is the problem. True peace comes from never considering violence as an option. You must learn to think differently. After they left the chamber, Bitna was furious. We can't win. They don't want us to solve problems. They want us to solve problems their way. The second test was worse. They were taken to an archive room and shown historical footage from the collective species past. Ancient wars from thousands of years ago. Primitive weapons. Small-scale conflicts that looked almost quaint compared to human history. This is what we have evolved beyond, Tess explained gently. These images shame us, but we study them to remember what we must never become again. Then they showed human history, world wars, nuclear weapons, millions dead. The images were brutal and real. The collective observers watched in horror and disgust. How do you live with this knowledge? Asked a Quillari scientist. How do you sleep knowing your ancestors did such things? We remember, Taemin said quietly. We remember so we don't repeat it. But you keep the weapons, Velthar pressed. You maintain the capability. That shows you haven't truly evolved. That evening, a young cultural officer named Mirai came to Taemin's quarters. She looked nervous. Captain, I've been spending time with some of the Quillari staff. Making friends. She paused. They told me something. There have been other species invited to join the collective, 3 of them over the past 2 centuries. And? Taemin asked, though he had a feeling he knew where this was going. They failed the tests. The collective quarantined them on their homeworlds. They're not allowed to develop advanced technology or leave their solar systems. The collective monitors them constantly, waiting for them to evolve properly. It's been over 200 years for one of them. Taemin felt cold. They're prisoners. The collective calls it protective custody. They say these species are too dangerous to join galactic society, so they keep them isolated until they naturally become more peaceful. Mirai's voice dropped to a whisper. Captain, the Quillari are scared for us. They like humans. But they think we're going to fail the test too. Meanwhile, Kyung-soo had been doing his own investigation. The engineer had access to the station's technical systems and had been poking around where he probably shouldn't. He found references to something called Quarantine Protocol Theta, detailed plans for blockading Earth, specifications for monitoring systems, projections for how long it would take humanity to naturally evolve beyond aggression. Thousands of years. When he showed his findings to Taemin, the captain felt sick. They never intended to accept us. This whole thing is a trial to determine what level of threat we pose. We need to tell Ambassador Jeho, Hana said. They gathered in the ambassador's quarters. Jeho listened to everything, his face growing pale. This can't be right. They wouldn't invite us just to imprison us. They would if they think we're dangerous, Bitna said. And by their standards we are. We have nuclear weapons. We have a unified military. We remember how to fight. To them, that makes us monsters. The third test was announced the next day. This time they would be evaluated individually. Each team member would watch simulated atrocities from human history and explain how humanity had overcome such evil. Taemin went first. They showed him battles he'd fought in during the Unification Wars, people he'd killed, orders he'd given that resulted in deaths. The collective observers watched his reactions, measuring his heart rate, his brain activity, looking for signs of aggression or remorse. Do you regret these actions? Velthar asked. Yes, Taemin said honestly. I regret every death, but I don't regret fighting. We were protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. You could have found peaceful solutions. There wasn't time. People were dying. Sometimes you have to act fast, and fast action requires force. Velthar's light dimmed. That belief is exactly what concerns us, Captain. You still see violence as a tool. You have not truly evolved beyond it. When Hana took her test, she tried a different approach. She talked about human progress, about peace movements and diplomatic achievements. She was optimistic and sincere. The collective seemed more pleased with her responses, but then they asked her a hypothetical question. If a hostile force attacked Earth today, what would you do? Hana hesitated. I would try to communicate with them. Find out what they want. And if communication failed? If they began killing civilians? Then, Hana's voice became steel. Then we would stop them, by any means necessary. The collective observers noted this. Another failure. That night, the human team received a message from Earth. Admiral Su Jin, commander of the Home Fleet, sent an encrypted transmission. Long-range sensors had detected unusual activity in nearby systems. Unknown vessels moving in patterns that suggested surveillance. Someone was watching Earth. We need to leave, Bitna said. Now, before they spring whatever trap they're planning. We can't, Jae-ho protested. If we run, we confirm everything they fear about us. We have to stay and prove we're peaceful. We are peaceful, Kyung-soo said. But we're not helpless, there's a difference, and they refuse to see it. Taemin made a decision. We stay for now, but we prepare for the worst. Kyung-soo, can you get a message back to Earth without the collective intercepting it? I can try. Tell them what we've learned. Tell them about the quarantine protocols. Taemin looked at each member of his team, and tell them to be ready. The final test was scheduled for 3 days later. A formal ceremony where humanity would renounce violence and accept collective guidance. The team would have to decide before then, submit to what amounted to cultural death or refuse and face quarantine. 2 days before the ceremony, Mirai came running to Taemin with news. Her Quilari friends had told her something else. The collective had detailed psychological profiles of the entire human delegation. They knew about Taemin's military service. They knew about Bitna's special forces background. They knew that even the scientists and diplomats had basic combat training. They know we're all soldiers, Mirai said breathlessly. Every human on this ship. They think we're a military invasion disguised as a diplomatic mission. That's paranoid, Hana said. Is it? Bitna asked. They've lived in peace for 10,000 years. They've forgotten what real military looks like. To them, even basic self-defense training makes us dangerous killers. Taemin thought about Earth, about humanity's place in the galaxy. They'd come here hoping to join something greater. Instead, they'd found a society so comfortable in their peace that they couldn't tell the difference between capability and intent. The collective saw humanity's weapons and assumed humans wanted to use them. They didn't understand that the strongest warrior is the one who chooses not to fight. But how do you explain that to people who've never had to fight for anything? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. On the morning of the day before the ceremony, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Unknown vessels had entered the system. The collective's peaceful existence was about to end. Captain Taemin stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Promise and watched the alien station grow larger on the view screen. It was beautiful. Crystalline towers spiraled into space, glowing with soft light. This was humanity's first contact with the Galactic Collective, and his hands were sweating inside his gloves. Distance to station? He asked. 200 kilometers in closing, replied Bitna from the security console. She didn't look happy. Bitna never looked happy when they were heading into unknown situations. Dr. Hana moved beside Taemin, her eyes wide with wonder. It's magnificent. 7 species living together in perfect harmony. Can you imagine? Taemin could imagine. He'd read all the reports. The collective had been watching Earth for decades. They saw humanity's wars, the nuclear weapons, the conflicts that scarred the planet. Then 20 years ago, the major wars stopped. Humanity created a unified government. The collective decided humans were finally ready to join civilized society. Ambassador Jae-ho adjusted his formal uniform and cleared his throat. Remember, everyone, we're representing all of humanity today. They're offering us technology beyond our dreams, medicine that can cure any disease, energy systems that could end poverty. All we have to do is prove we've evolved beyond our violent past, Bitna snorted, and give up our weapons. Don't forget that part. A small price for peace, Jae-ho said firmly. Taemin said nothing. He remembered his time in the wars before the unification. He remembered what people did to each other when they were desperate. The collective had never faced that kind of desperation. Their history files showed minor conflicts from thousands of years ago. Nothing more. They'd evolved in a safe part of the galaxy, where resources were plentiful and threats were rare. Lucky them. The comm system crackled. A voice spoke in perfect English, though it had a strange musical quality. Human vessel Horizons promise you are cleared for docking Bay 7. Welcome to Unity Station. May your arrival mark a new era of enlightenment. Enlightenment, Bitna muttered. They keep using that word. The docking procedure was smooth. Too smooth. Taman noticed how the station's systems guided their ship with precision that made human technology look primitive. When the airlock finally opened, he took a deep breath and led his team into the station. The welcoming committee was waiting. Taman had seen pictures, but nothing prepared him for meeting them in person. The Lumini looked like beings made of light, their forms barely solid. The Kalari were living crystals that pulsed with colors. There were others, each more alien than the last. At the front stood Archon Velthar, the Lumini leader. His form blazed brighter than the others. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Humans, you have traveled far to reach us. We welcome you to Unity Station, where the enlightened species of the galaxy gather in perfect peace. He paused, and Taman felt like he was being examined. We have watched your species with great interest. Your capacity for growth is remarkable. You have survived your violent infancy and taken your first steps toward true civilization. Hana stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Archon Velthar, we are honored by your invitation. Humanity is eager to learn from the collective and take our place among the peaceful species of the galaxy. Peaceful, Velthar repeated. Yes, that is what you must prove. Your species still clings to weapons of terrible power. Your military structures remain intact. Your culture glorifies warriors and conflict. These are the remnants of your primitive nature. To join us, you must shed these relics and embrace true peace. Taman felt his jaw tighten. The way Velthar spoke made it sound like humanity was something dirty that needed to be cleaned. Jeho quickly intervened. We understand, Archon. That's why we're here, to demonstrate that humanity has changed. We're ready for your evaluation. Evaluation, said another voice. This came from Thess, a Kalari whose crystalline body shifted through shades of blue and green. Please forgive my colleague's harsh words. We are simply cautious. You must understand, humans, that the collective has maintained peace for over 10,000 years. We have built a society where violence is unknown, where weapons are museum relics, where all conflicts are resolved through dialogue and reason. That sounds wonderful, Hana said sincerely. It is, Thess replied, and Taman thought he detected warmth in the alien's voice. But it is also fragile. One species clinging to violence could shatter everything we've built. That is why we must be certain of your evolution. They were led deeper into the station. The architecture was stunning, all flowing curves and natural light. Taman noticed something else, too. There were no guards, no security checkpoints, no defensive positions. The station was completely undefended. Amazing, isn't it? Said a young officer named Kyung-Soo walking beside him. Kyung-Soo was the ship's chief engineer, and his eyes were everywhere, cataloging everything. Not a single weapon, not even basic defensive systems that I can see. They don't need them, Bitna said quietly. According to our briefings, they have the Keepers. AI drones with overwhelming firepower, but they've never had to use them against external threats. So what do they use them for? Kyung-Soo asked. Bitna didn't answer, but her expression said enough. That evening, there was a grand ceremony in the main hall. Thousands of aliens gathered to witness humanity's arrival. Velthar gave a long speech about the journey from barbarism to enlightenment. He spoke about how humanity would be guided and shaped, how their aggressive tendencies would be gently removed over time. You have come seeking angels, Velthar said, his light pulsing with what might have been pride. And angels you shall become. The violence that stains your history will be washed away. The warrior instincts that drive you will be soothed and forgotten. You will be uplifted from your savage nature and given your place among the truly civilized. The aliens applauded. It was in strange sound, different for each species. Taman looked at his crew. Hana seemed inspired, her eyes shining with hope. Jeho was nodding along with the speech, but Bitna's hand was clenched into a fist, and Kyung-Soo was frowning. Later, in their assigned quarters, the team gathered privately. Did anyone else feel like we were being insulted for 3 hours straight? Bitna asked. They're just cautious, Jeho said. We have to prove ourselves. By giving up everything that kept us alive, Bitna shot back. Our weapons, our military, our defensive capabilities, they want us defenseless. They want us peaceful, Hana corrected. There's a difference. Taman walked to the window and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, waiting to hear if humanity had been accepted or rejected. Billions of people hoping for a better future. The first test starts tomorrow, he said quietly. Let's focus on that. We'll take this one step at a time. But as he lay in bed that night, Taman couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The collective seemed so certain that humanity needed to change. That violence was a disease to be cured, not a tool to be controlled. They had never needed to fight for survival. They didn't understand the difference between capability and intent. They saw humanity's weapons and assumed humanity was dangerous. They didn't understand that sometimes the capacity for violence was the only thing standing between civilization and chaos. Tomorrow the tests would begin, and Taman had a sinking feeling that humanity was being evaluated for something very different than membership.